What do you get when you combine religion, fascism, and conspiracy theories? And no, the answer to that question is not Trump, although that would be a good answer. The answer to this question in particular is a delightful individual by the name of Stephen McNallen. And you may be asking yourself, well, who is this person? Well, allow me to answer that question with another question.
What do German gods and obscure psychological theories have to do with the present needs of our race? How does a topic seemingly so abstract impinge on the crisis that faces white people around the world?
Yeah, he just comes right out and says it, doesn't he? So this guy, um, he's in charge of a group called the Ossetru Folk Assembly. It's gone by a couple of different names and a few different uh incarnations, I guess, but basically him and his group has been around since the 70s, and I'm sure you could probably guess by that what this guy in that group is largely all about. Um, and you know what? I figure since I'm in the within the circles of heathenry, you can tell, and namely the parts of heathenry that are not fascist and are not racist and are not full of scumbags like that guy. Uh, I figure I would do my due diligence in making fun of him, because far be it from me to miss an opportunity to make fun of a fascist.
One doesn't have to be a literal believer in the reality of Wotan to appreciate his importance as an empowering symbol for the reawakening of the European peoples.
Alright, now look, you started off good there, alright? You don't have to be a literal believer in Wotan here in order to see him as an important symbol. Fair enough, alright? You know what? We got cultural history there. Everyone's got a history. All cultures have history. You got certain symbols and deities. We're all good. And then you gotta add in the reawakening part. The reawakening of the European people. Now, where are you going with that one? I have a feeling I know where you're going with this. In fact, I know where you're going because I've already seen the whole video, but I'm gonna ham it up for the camera anyway. Where are you going with this one, Chief?
The neo-romantic youth movement, the Wandervögelen, took to the highways and byways in the spirit of Wotan the Wanderer, and the restless tramp of their feet gave way later to the aimless migrations of the unemployed, and later to the marching of soldiers.
Yeah? How long did it take you to reach that point? 3.5 minutes? So what you're telling me here, all right? So if I'm picking up on this one, all right? So the German nationalists were the good guys. They were just following the spirit. They were just innocent folks going on the highways and byways, and their restless feet rose into the energy of their spirit just bubbled up inside them, and it was because of that energy that gave rise to one of the most violent and destructive regimes in human history. It wasn't because of um, a bunch of self-centered goose-stepping asshats who wanted a bunch of power and to rule all of Europe. It wasn't because of all that. It wasn't because of anti-Semitism or, racism or any of those other factors going on at the time. No, it was just the spirit of the people. They just had to let it all out. They just had to go into the hills and just let it all out. That's what happened? Is that what you're telling me here, Chief? I don't know if that's what he's telling me. I've watched this guy's whole video. I don't even, he goes into philosophy and shit. He talks about, like, universal consciousness. He's going into, like, some QAnon type shit, okay? I could show you all this stuff. You can look it up. It doesn't make any sense. You know what? Let's see what other gems this guy's got. Maybe this one was just a bad take. This video, it's one of those where he's just a bad take, bad taste. You know what? The rest of it, maybe he'll redeem himself in some other videos, right?
The present-day invasion of Germany by Middle Eastern immigrants will only make Wotan's return all the more dramatic. How will he manifest this time?
Nope, I was wrong. He's blaming the Muslims now. He doesn't like immigrants. What a surprise. You can't have those immigrants coming in. Oh, the horror. You might have to, you know, see other cultures and deal with other people. And it's going to make Wotan's return even more dramatic. You know, all the cool extremists have whatever deity they're venerating here coming back in a blaze of glory. You got this guy with Wotan who's gonna come back down because Muslims are in Germany, I guess. In America, you've got the televangelists. They're saying Jesus is gonna come and open up a can of whoop ass on the U.S. because Democrats and LGBT. You know, but go ahead. His return is going to be dramatic. You seem very in tune and sensible and um, not at all, spending way too much time on 4chan. So go ahead. How do you think he's going to manifest?
I believe we will see two things happen. First, there will be a violent reaction against the Islamification of Germany. Wotan will arise to defend his people. Although the average German may not want to admit it, the truth is clear. Even if not one more immigrant is allowed in Germany, there are already enough of them to change the face of Germany in the coming years and forever.
Well, you're half right on that one, Chief. There is a violent reaction to Muslims, at least here in the United States. What with Trump and the gang putting out all their propaganda, disappearing all the people off the streets, saying all this unhinged shit about, Muslims and immigrants and all that. So, the violent reaction part, I think you got that one down, Pat. Um, as for immigrants in Germany, well, based on my surface level research, there's about 7% of the German population as of today is Muslim. Um, Not sure what you think they're going to be doing there, my man. Not sure what they're going to be changing there. I don't think 7% of the population is just going to come thundering on in there and start changing shit around, alright? Not that they'd even care to do that in the first place. I haven't heard of anything wacky going on in Germany. Haven't been paying attention, but I feel like if half the things this guy were saying were true, probably be hearing about it. Although granted, there is an increase in far right extremism going around. So you're half right, my dude. A violent reaction to immigrants, you got that one. You got that one, alright? This guy is such a unhinged lunacy, I swear. Unhinged.
If the politicians do not remove them, Wotan, whether you think of him as an archetype or as a god, will intervene to restore balance. Wotan now sleeps, but he will waken, and he will be ready for war.
Well, does that sound familiar at all? We need to get rid of the immigrants. We need politicians to remove this group of people. There may be a violent reaction to this. And then calling on divine power at that. Wotan now slumbers, but he will awaken and he will be ready for war. Sounding like some shit out of a 1950s B movie right there. And that's how it goes, isn't it? I mean, you get somebody who calls for the removal of a group of people. It starts out as immigrants, and then it specifies into people that they can scapegoat, minorities, Muslims in the case of this guy, and then he's literally saying there will be a violent reaction and saying that some divine being is going to come down and make war. Like, you've heard that one before. You showed the guy earlier who was saying shit like that in the 1930s and 40s. There's a guy in charge of the US right now who's saying shit like that. Um, and it does lead to violence. That's the thing. You need to make sure to call this shit out, because that kind of thinking, whether it's that guy or Trump or whoever, it leads to violence at some point, and you don't want it to get to that point. In the case of this guy, though, like, he doesn't have a huge reach or anything like that, and he hasn't made a video, I think, in like 3 years, so he's like retired or something, hopefully, because I really don't like seeing that kind of crap. And you know what? Like, all the people, there's a lot of people out there who are worshiping old gods, you know, Wotan or Odin or Woden or any of the pagan gods, and they're not all like that guy. But people like that guy are gonna set a stereotype, and you need to make sure to call that kind of shit out when it happens. I might be a little bit late to the punch here. I think this video came out in 2017, so, but you just need to call this crap out. We're not like that guy. I'm not like that guy. I can't speak for every pagan out there, but neither can he. So, yeah, I guess the point I'm making here, that kind of mindset is going to lead to violence. You don't want it to get to that point. You got to make sure to call this shit out, because it does lead to violence.